In a galaxy where love is rare and trust rarer, I whispered a hope that had lived in my heart for far too long. I wish you were my bride. She was small, fragile, yet carried the wisdom and power of a species older than humanity itself. The words should have been impossible, dangerous, unthinkable, but she turned, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I accept." This is not a story about romance alone. It's a story about how human sincerity, courage, and emotion can bridge worlds, defy traditions, and create bonds that echo across the stars. When the galaxy expected fear or caution, it received something far stronger: human love. If you enjoy HFY sci-fi stories, emotional alien bonds, and moments where humanity surprises the universe, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Your support helps bring more unforgettable stories like this to life. Ethan lived on the edge of a wide forest where the trees grew thick and the roads grew quiet. He worked at a small wildlife rehabilitation center, the kind most people never noticed unless an animal was hurt. His days were slow, filled with cleaning enclosures, preparing food, and checking on injured creatures that could not speak for themselves. He liked it that way. Silence did not ask questions, and animals did not demand explanations. People in the nearby town knew Ethan as polite but distant. He did his job well, paid his bills on time, and rarely joined conversations longer than needed. No one knew much about his past, and Ethan preferred it that way. Years earlier, life had taken something precious from him. Since then, he had learned to move forward without expecting too much from the world. One evening, just as the sky was turning orange and the forest shadows were stretching long across the ground, Ethan finished locking the main building. He planned to head home, cook a simple meal, and spend the night reading. As he walked along the narrow dirt path behind the center, he heard a sound that made him stop. It was not the sharp cry of a fox or the rustle of a deer. It was softer, uneven, almost like a breath, struggling to become a sound. Ethan turned toward the trees. Years of working with wildlife had trained his ears. Something was wrong. He followed the noise carefully, stepping over roots and fallen leaves until he reached a small clearing. There, near a broken branch, he saw something that made his heart tighten in confusion. At first glance, it looked like a fox curled up against the ground. But as he moved closer, the shape became impossible to explain. The creature was small, no taller than a young child. With fox-like ears and a tail, but her body was shaped like a human's. Her clothing was torn and unfamiliar, made of rough fabric that did not belong to any local style. She was bleeding from a cut on her leg. Ethan froze. Every part of his training told him to call someone, to step back, to question what he was seeing. But another part of him, older, quieter, and stronger, told him that this being was injured and afraid. The foxwoman's eyes opened suddenly. They were wide, alert, and filled with fear. She tried to move but failed, letting out a weak sound that made Ethan's chest ache. She looked at him like a trapped animal, ready to fight or flee but unable to do either. "It's okay," Ethan said softly without thinking. "I'm not going to hurt you." She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Still, her body remained tense. Ethan slowly removed his jacket and placed it on the ground between them, a silent gesture of peace. He took a step back, then another, giving her space. When she didn't move, he carefully examined the wound from a distance. The injury looked painful, but not deadly. She needed help soon. The biggest danger was not the wound, it was the world. If anyone else found her, questions would follow. Cameras would appear. Fear would turn into control. Ethan knew how quickly curiosity could become cruelty. He made a decision that would change his life. "I'm going to help you," he said quietly, "but I need you to trust me." Slowly, carefully, he reached for a small medical kit he always carried. He cleaned the wound with steady hands, moving gently, stopping whenever she flinched. She watched him closely, studying every movement. When he finished, he wrapped the injury with clean bandages. The foxwoman's breathing slowed. She did not run. That was when Ethan realized something important. She was not wild in the way animals were wild. She was cautious, aware, intelligent. She was choosing to stay. Ethan helped her stand. She leaned against him, light as a shadow. He could feel her trembling, not just from pain, but from exhaustion. Carefully, he supported her weight and guided her toward his small cabin near the center. Inside, the space was simple. A bed, a table, shelves of books, and warm light from a lamp. He helped her sit down and brought her water. She sniffed it first, then drank slowly. They stayed like that for a long moment, studying each other. "I'm Ethan," he said, placing a hand on his chest. She hesitated, then softly replied, "Mira." Her voice was quiet but clear. That single word confirmed everything. She could speak. She could understand at least a little. Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and responsibility. This was not just an injured being. This was a person. He prepared simple food, placing it near her rather than handing it directly. She ate carefully, like someone unused to safety. Every sound outside made her ears twitch. When a car passed far away, she tensed. "You don't have to be afraid here," Ethan said gently. "No one knows you're here." That night, Ethan did not sleep much. He sat in a chair while Mira rested on the bed, wrapped in blankets. He watched the rise and fall of her breathing, listening for signs of pain or fear. Memories surfaced of nights he had spent watching over someone else long ago, wishing he could protect them from the world. Morning came quietly. Sunlight filtered through the window. Mira was awake, sitting upright, her eyes sharper now, more curious than afraid. She studied the room, the books, the simple furniture. When Ethan offered her fresh bandages and food, she accepted without hesitation. Over the next hours, they learned each other slowly. Mira spoke in short sentences, her words careful. She explained that she came from deep within the forest, from a hidden community that avoided humans. An accident had separated her from them. She had been hurt while trying to escape something she did not want to describe yet. Ethan did not press her. Trust, he knew, could not be rushed. He explained his work, his home, and the rules of the human world in simple terms. He promised he would not force her to do anything or tell anyone about her. Mira listened closely, her tail curling slightly when she felt uncertain, relaxing when she felt calm. By evening, something fragile but real had formed between them. Not romance, not destiny, understanding. As the sun dipped again below the trees, Ethan stood by the window, watching the forest that had given him his life's work and now something far more complicated. Behind him, Mira sat quietly, no longer hiding. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt that his quiet life had not ended, it had just begun to change. The second day began with soft sounds instead of fear. Birds called from the trees outside the cabin, and sunlight moved slowly across the wooden floor. Ethan woke early, as he always did, but this time his first thought was not work. It was the quiet presence in the next room. Mira was already awake. She sat near the window, knees drawn close, watching the forest as if it might speak back to her. Her ears turned slightly at every sound, but there was less tension in her posture than the night before. She was still cautious, but not frozen by fear. Ethan moved slowly, so he would not startle her. He placed a cup of warm water and a small plate of food on the table, then stepped back. Mira watched his hands carefully before standing and approaching. She smelled the food first, then nodded and ate. They shared the space without rushing words. After breakfast, Ethan checked the bandage on her leg. The wound looked better, still painful, but healing. He cleaned it again, explaining each step, even though he wasn't sure how much she understood. Mira listened closely, her eyes following his movements. "You always explain," she said quietly. Ethan paused. "It helps people feel safe." She thought about that, then nodded. In my home, explanations were rare. He did not ask more. Some truths came only when they were ready. The day passed slowly. Ethan canceled his usual visits to the outer enclosures, choosing instead to work close to the cabin. He cleaned tools, sorted supplies, and prepared reports he could submit later. All the while he remained aware of Mira's presence, careful not to crowd her. Mira explored the cabin in small steps. She touched the spines of books, studied the pictures on the walls, and examined objects that humans took for granted. A simple clock fascinated her. When it chimed softly, she jumped, then laughed at herself. That laugh surprised both of them. It was light, brief, and real. Later, Ethan showed her the wildlife center from a distance. He made sure no one else was nearby. They stood near the edge of the property, hidden by trees, watching injured animals rest and recover. "You help them," Myra said. "That's the idea. Then you let them go." "Yes." She grew quiet. "And if they don't want to go?" Ethan answered honestly. "Then we give them time. Leaving only matters if it's their choice." Mira looked at him carefully, as if placing that answer somewhere important. As the afternoon faded, Mira spoke more. Her words were still careful, but longer now. She explained that her people lived quietly, avoiding conflict by staying unseen. Long ago, trust with outsiders had gone wrong. Since then, rules had grown strict. She had broken one of those rules. "I went too far," she admitted. "I was curious." Curiosity, Ethan thought, had always been dangerous and necessary. When evening came, rain began to fall. Soft at first, then steady. The forest darkened, and the air cooled. Mira stiffened at the sound of thunder far away. "It's just noise," Ethan said gently. She shook her head. "Not just noise. It reminds me." He did not push. Instead, he lit a small lamp and put on quiet music, something slow and calming. Myra listened, her ears lowering slightly as her body relaxed. That night, Ethan cooked a simple meal. Mira helped by watching and asking questions. She laughed when he nearly burned the food and smiled when he shared it with her instead of pretending everything was perfect. Later, as the rain continued, Ethan sat at the small table, writing notes. Mira curled up on the chair nearby, her tail wrapped close. She watched him work for a long time. "You don't talk much," she said. "I listen better than I talk." She considered that. "Then listen." He set the pen down. She spoke of the forest, of silent paths and hidden homes, of learning to stay unnoticed. She spoke of loneliness without using the word, of days spent watching instead of living. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Ethan listened. When she finished, the room felt heavier, but clearer. "You can stay," he said finally. "As long as you need." Mira looked at him, surprised. "Even if it's dangerous for you?" "Some things are worth risk," he replied. The rain stopped late that night. The forest breathed again. Mira slept deeply, without fear. Ethan stayed awake longer than usual, watching the shadows move across the walls. He realized something then. Silence no longer felt empty. It felt shared. By the third morning, routines began to form. Mira helped with small tasks, moving carefully but confidently. She learned how humans cleaned, cooked, and organized. Ethan learned her habits, how she preferred quiet mornings, how sudden movements made her uneasy, how she listened more than she spoke. Trust grew not through big promises, but through small consistency. Yet outside the cabin, the world remained unaware and dangerous. A truck drove past the road that afternoon. Mira froze, eyes wide. Ethan stepped between her and the window without thinking. "You're safe," he said. She believed him. But both of them knew safety was fragile. As night returned, Mira stood at the door, looking toward the forest. Ethan joined her, standing at a respectful distance. "My people will search," she said softly. "When I don't know," Ethan nodded. "Then we prepare. Together." Mira turned to him. In her eyes was something new. Not fear, not confusion, but trust shaped by choice. For the first time since she had fallen in the forest, she felt she was not alone. And Ethan, standing beside her, understood that his quiet life was no longer just his own. Days passed quietly, but the air between them began to change. Not loudly, not suddenly, just enough for both to notice. The cabin no longer felt like a shelter borrowed from fear. It felt lived in. Mira moved through the space with more confidence now. She knew where things belonged. She knew which floorboard made a sound and which window caught the morning light first. Ethan noticed these things too. He also noticed the way Mira watched him when she thought he wasn't looking. Not with suspicion anymore, but with interest, as if she were trying to understand something deeper than words. On the fourth evening, Ethan returned from the center later than usual. He had spoken with a colleague about extending leave, making sure no one questioned his absence. The lie sat heavy on his chest, but he told himself it was necessary. Mira sensed the change in him the moment he stepped inside. "You're tired," she said. "Yes, not your body." Ethan paused. He placed his bag down slowly. "You're very observant." She tilted her head slightly. "You carry something old." They sat across from each other at the small table. Outside, the forest was calm. Inside, memories stirred. Ethan had learned long ago how to keep his past quiet. He had buried it under routine, under responsibility, under silence. But Mira did not ask like others did. She did not push. She waited, and waiting made it harder to hide. "I used to live differently," Ethan said, after a long pause. "It wasn't always this quiet." Mira listened, hands folded, eyes steady. "There was someone," he continued. "Someone I planned a future with. We talked about small things. Where to live. What kind of mornings we wanted. Simple dreams." His voice tightened, but he kept going. One day, those plans stopped. He did not explain how. He did not need to. Myra lowered her gaze, understanding the shape of loss, even if she did not know its details. Her people knew loss too. They simply carried it in different ways. "That pain still lives with you," she said. "Yes. Do you want it to leave?" Ethan thought about the question. "I don't know if it ever fully leaves, but it gets quieter." That night, Mira struggled to sleep. Ethan noticed her shifting, her ears flicking at every sound. He offered her tea, then sat in the chair nearby, giving her the comfort of presence without pressure. Hours passed. Ethan believed she had fallen asleep when he finally spoke unquietly, more to himself than to her. "I wish you were my bride." The words slipped out before he could stop them. They were not meant as a request. They were not meant for her ears. They were the voice of something broken, something tired of being alone. A thought shaped by longing, not intention. He stared at the floor after saying it, ashamed of his weakness. Behind him, Mira's eyes opened. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply listened. In her world, words like that were not thrown into the air without meaning. They were spoken only when a bond was forming, when a choice was being offered. She did not understand everything about human speech, but she understood sincerity, and Ethan's voice had been sincere. Morning came softly. Ethan woke with a headache and a sense of regret he could not place. Mira was already awake, sitting at the table, calm and composed. She watched him carefully. "You said something last night," she said. Ethan froze. "I was half asleep," he replied quickly. "I didn't mean I know you did not mean it as a demand," she said gently. "But you meant the feeling." He met her eyes. There was no fear there, no confusion, only clarity. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "I shouldn't have said that. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable." "It did not make me uncomfortable," Mira replied. "It made me curious." She explained slowly and carefully what such words meant among her people. How bonds were formed through trust and shared hardship, not ceremony. How choosing someone meant choosing responsibility, patience, and care. Ethan listened in stunned silence. "I am not saying yes," Mira continued. "Not yet. I am saying I understand why you spoke." Relief and emotion mixed in his chest. The day that followed was heavier, but also more honest. They spoke more openly. Ethan shared more of his past, not every detail, but enough to explain the shape of his silence. Mira shared stories of her people, how closeness was rare, how trust was earned slowly, how leaving someone behind was considered a deep wound. As the sun lowered, Ethan stood outside, watching the forest. Mira joined him. "You are afraid," she said. "Not of me, of hurting you," he admitted. "Of wanting something I shouldn't." She considered his words. "Wanting is not wrong. Taking without asking is—" That night, nothing dramatic happened. No promises were made. No lines were crossed, but something important shifted. They were no longer just protector and protected. They were two beings choosing to stay. Ethan lay awake long after Mira slept, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the words he had spoken and the truth behind them. He thought about how strange it felt to be seen so clearly. For the first time in years, his past did not feel like a weight dragging him backward. It felt like a story that could finally move forward. And in the quiet of the cabin, with the forest breathing softly outside, Ethan understood that some wishes were not meant to be hidden. They were meant to be answered slowly, carefully, when the time was right. The days after that conversation felt different. Not awkward, not heavy, just more aware. Every small action carried meaning now. When Ethan poured water, when Mira folded blankets, when they shared quiet moments, there was a sense that both were choosing each second carefully. Mira's leg healed enough for her to walk without support. She tested her strength outside the cabin, moving slowly among the trees. Ethan watched from a distance, giving her space. He knew how important independence was to her. Protection should never feel like a cage. That afternoon, something changed. Ethan noticed signs near the edge of the forest, marks in the soil, broken leaves arranged in a pattern. He recognized the feeling immediately. Someone else had been there. Myra saw it too. "They are close," she said quietly. Ethan's chest tightened. "Your people?" "Yes, scouts." Fear rose, not panic, but concern shaped by care. If they found her here, questions would follow. Demands, judgments. Ethan knew how quickly. Others could decide what was best without listening. That evening, Mira sat across from him, unusually still. "They will not like this place," she said. "They will not like you." Ethan smiled faintly. "That wouldn't be the first time." She did not smile back. "They will say you are dangerous," she continued. "That humans take what they want. And what do you say?" Mira looked down at her hands. "I say you asked." That answer mattered more than she knew. Later that night, voices echoed faintly from the trees. Not loud, but clear enough to confirm the truth. Mira stiffened. Her ears turned sharply toward the sound. "They are calling me," she said. Ethan stood. "Do you want to answer?" She hesitated. "I must." They stepped outside together. The forest felt different now, tense, watchful. Mira stepped forward, speaking in a language Ethan did not understand. Her voice was calm, steady. The response came quickly. Shadows moved. Figures emerged between the trees, tall, fox-like forms with alert eyes and guarded expressions. They stopped when they saw Ethan. One stepped forward. The air felt heavy. Mira turned to Ethan. "They want me to return now." Ethan nodded slowly. "And what do you want?" The question surprised her. "No one has asked me that before," she said. The silence that followed was long. The forest seemed to wait with them. Mira faced her people again. She spoke clearly, her voice firm but respectful. Ethan caught only pieces, tone, posture, meaning carried without words. Then she turned back to him. "I choose to stay," she said. A sharp reaction followed from the others. Their voices rose, not angry, but alarmed. Myra answered them again, stronger this time. Ethan stepped forward slightly, careful not to threaten. "I will not keep her here against her will," he said calmly, though he knew they might not understand his words. "She chooses," Mira translated. Another pause. The leaders studied Ethan closely, not with hate, but with judgment. Then something unexpected happened. Mira stepped fully to Ethan's side. In her culture, that movement meant commitment. Not ownership. Not ceremony. "Choice, I accept," she said softly. Ethan turned to her, shocked. "Mira, I know what it means," she said gently. "I have thought about it." Her people reacted sharply now. Voices rose. The forest filled with tension. Mira did not move. "I choose him," she said again. "Not because he saved me, because he listened." The leader spoke again, slower this time. Mira listened carefully, then nodded. "They say the choice is dangerous," she explained to Ethan. that I may lose my place among them. And what do you say? I say safety without choice is another kind of fear. Silence fell. At last, the leader stepped back. Not in approval, but in respect. They will leave, Mira said. But they will watch. The figures faded into the trees as quietly as they had come. When it was over, Ethan finally let out the breath he had been holding. You didn't have to do that, he said. I did, Mira replied. For myself. They returned to the cabin in silence. The night felt heavier, but clearer. Mira sat down slowly, her hands shaking not from fear, but from the weight of what she had chosen. Ethan knelt in front of her, careful and serious. I need to be clear, he said. I will not claim you. I will not decide your future for you. If you ever want to leave, I will help you. Mira met his eyes. That is why I chose you. No promises of forever were made. No dramatic declarations followed. Instead, there was something stronger understanding. That night, they sat together, close, but not touching, sharing warmth without crossing boundaries. The forest outside was quiet again, but changed. So were they. For the first time, Ethan did not feel like he was protecting something fragile. He felt like he was standing beside someone strong. And Mira, watching the steady calm of the human who never tried to own her, knew that whatever came next would be faced together, not because of fate, but because of choice. Morning arrived slowly, as if the world itself needed time to adjust to what had happened. The forest was quiet, not empty, but calm in a way that felt respectful. Light filtered through the trees and rested gently on the cabin walls. Ethan woke before Mira. He sat at the table with a cup of warm tea, staring out the window. His thoughts were steady, not racing. For once, he did not feel pulled by regret or fear. He felt present. When Mira stepped into the room, her movements were unhurried. She looked rested but thoughtful. She joined him at the table without speaking at first. They sat together in silence that felt natural, not forced. You stayed, Ethan said finally, not as a question. Yes, Mira replied. And I am still staying, he nodded. I want to make sure something is clear. Nothing has changed unless you want it to. She looked at him carefully. Some things have changed already, like what? I am no longer running, she said. And you are no longer hiding. That made him smile quietly. The days that followed were simple but meaningful. Mira began to walk farther into the forest, sometimes alone, sometimes with Ethan nearby. She showed him hidden paths and places where the ground felt alive with memory. Ethan showed her the human world in small pieces, how letters formed words, how time was counted, how choices shaped days. They did not rush closeness. They cooked together, worked side by side, and rested when the day ended. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. Both felt right. Word spread quietly among the animals of the forest. Not in language, but in feeling. The space around the cabin became peaceful. Even injured creatures seemed calmer when Mira was near. Ethan noticed this, but did not comment. Some things did not need explanation. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ethan and Mira sat on the wooden steps outside the cabin. The air was cool. The forest breathed slowly around them. You once said you wished, Mira said softly. Ethan looked at her. Yes, I did not answer then, she continued. Because wishes are heavy? There, he agreed. She turned toward him fully now. In my people's way, choosing a life partner does not mean binding the future. It means choosing how to face each day. Ethan listened carefully. I choose to face my days with you, she said. He felt the weight of those words, but also their freedom. I choose the same, he replied. Not to own, not to decide for you, just to walk beside you. That was enough. They did not celebrate loudly. There were no grand signs or announcements. Just a quiet understanding that settled between them like warmth. Life did not suddenly become easy. There were moments of tension. Mira sometimes missed her people. Ethan sometimes struggled with the fear of losing again. When those moments came, they did not hide them. They talked. And when words were not enough, they stayed close in silence. One afternoon, a visitor came to the wildlife center asking questions. Ethan handled it calmly, carefully. Mira stayed out of sight by choice, not fear. When the visitor left, Mira stepped back into the open without hesitation. "You trusted me to decide," she said. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Always." As seasons began to shift, Mira's strength fully returned. She helped more at the center, unseen but present. Ethan felt proud not because she belonged to him, but because she belonged to herself. One night, under a sky full of quiet stars, Ethan spoke again. "I once whispered something without thinking," he said. Mira smiled gently. "You spoke from truth." "I did," he said. "And now I speak with care. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I don't want to face it alone." She reached out then, not suddenly, not dramatically, but with certainty. Her hand rested over his. "Neither do I." The forest did not react. The world did not shift. But something inside both of them settled into place. They stood at the edge of two worlds, human and hidden, past and future. Not married by ceremony, not bound by force, but chosen. And that choice, made quietly and freely, became the strongest promise either of them had ever known.